Gas mine going down. Enemy down. Dropped him.
What's going on, everybody? This is dkdynamite, and today we're going to be talking about the gameplay that surfaced for an unreleased map in Cold War, an update on the early images of Black Ops 2024, and even more. Definitely stay tuned. But before we jump into that, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, drop a like, and make sure you have notifications on to stay up to date with everything going on in Cold War Year 2, Warzone, Modern Warfare 2, and any other future Call of Duty as well. In the background, enjoy some crazy gameplay. We got a couple of nukes here on the Infected mode here in Cold War multiplayer. One of them is WMD, one of the new Cold War Year 2 maps, and the other one is of Express, a pretty controversial remaster from Black Ops 2 multiplayer, a map that I'm not too fond of, but it does play well in this game, I can't deny that. And we ended up doing that one on stream though, which was insane. The reaction in chat was definitely priceless. But starting off with a very interesting report from Phantom Ice. I wanted to bring this up because it's pretty juicy. He says, and I quote, "I wonder what the next Black Ops version of Nuketown is gonna be. If I was to guess, I'd say either a straight up remaster of the OG version or a Pacific Nuketown set on the Pacific test sites." And that gets me thinking, right? We've had Nuketown in every Black Ops game to the point where I'm like, how different can you make Nuketown in a new Call of Duty game now? And I guess a Pacific version would be cool to see, if anything, if there was a Pacific test site where they would have like a little Nuketown set built. But honestly, I'm not really against a straight up remaster. I think Black Ops Cold War's version of Nuketown probably would have made sense to have a straight up remaster, since the era of Black Ops 1 and Cold War are so close to each other. But hey, seeing that in Black Ops 2024 really wouldn't bother me. But you guys know Treyarch to come up with a very interesting and creative way to bring that map back, unless we end up getting a record breaker where all of a sudden they release multiplayer and don't bring in a new version of Nuketown. However, I don't see them really doing that in 2024 when they have so much time to make that game. But obviously we're so far away from anything to do with Treyarch's next Call of Duty, so at this point it's all fun to just speculate and theorize with the little information that we do have thanks to Warzone Mobile. But out of nowhere the other day, we have somebody by the name of Scarface over on Twitter who posted gameplay which 66,000, time of recording this video, 66,000 people actually saw. And the video showcases some leaked gameplay of what was going to be Blackout 2 in Black Ops Cold War. Now the thing about this though is that it perfectly showcases Summit, which is going to be a region in this Blackout 2 map, which we also heard rumors about with Summit coming back into Cold War multiplayer at some point. That hasn't happened just yet, but we also have Nero Cinema posted a video kind of reacting to this gameplay. His video is also still up on YouTube. It looks okay, so I don't think we're at any risk with talking about or showing this gameplay here in this video. But if anything does change regarding that, I will pin a comment down below or put a tweet out on Twitter. Now, based on the gameplay we have though, it looks like the GKS at one point was a placeholder for the LC-10. There were doors, there was gold rarity weapons, there was a lot of loot, and obviously a lot of that is from Blackout. A lot of placeholders were present here. I think if Blackout 2 ever came out in Cold War, and obviously that would have been the Euro Mountains BR map, I definitely think they would have changed up the look and design of some of the ground loot, the gold rare weapons, the way the environment worked. But it's crazy to see that, yeah, Summit is here on the Cold War engine. It looks better than ever, and obviously you can see in the background the rest of the Battle Royale map and how Summit was part of a bunch of other regions, which we have most of those in Fireteam now. And like I mentioned in a previous video, I'm still sad that right now Fireteam is literally broken for, I think, everybody out there. Not that you can't find the game on it, but every time I click on the playlist and search for a match, it just says failed to host lobby rather quickly. Doesn't even let me get into a lobby, or it doesn't just search infinitely, it just crashes. It's the only mode that does that, so I'm not sure what happened with Fireteam altogether. Now, although we've heard so many rumors about Summit releasing in Year 2 of Cold War, we can obviously trace all those rumors back to, I think, the summer before Cold War even came out, when we had a lot of inside scoopers and leakers saying that the Back in Black pack from BO3 and BO4, containing maps like Summit, Firing Range, Jungle, and Slums, was intended to also make a return in Cold War, and we've gotten nearly all of those maps back in Cold War except for Summit and Firing Range. Coincidentally, the two best maps in the Back in Black pack, in my opinion. But, you know, Summit could be a grid-like situation where you look at Grid, which is inside of Duga and Fireteam, but they never added Grid on its own as a one-to-one remaster in multiplayer, even though the assets are sitting right there ready to go. I think even if Blackout 2 came out, the big Euro Mountains map, and some Summit was in there, I still think it might have been a similar situation where, yeah, Summit was available to play through that, but not regular 6v6 multiplayer, and that might be Treyarch's way of saying, okay guys, we get it, we've had Summit in every Black Ops game since BO1 over a decade ago. We had the remake of it in BO2, we had faithful remasters of it in BO3 and 4, but we're gonna break that cycle a little bit with Cold War by not having it in the regular 6v6 rotation, but they would still allow us to play it through Battle Royale, through Fire Team, Blackout 2, whatever they would have called it. But I still think it's crazy, right? Cold War is super similar to Black Ops 1 in terms of the era it takes place in, so it's weird that of all games to not feature Summit, it would be Black Ops Cold War, but it looks like there were plans at one point to include it, and there still is a chance, maybe a little bit, towards the end of the summer to still see this map added to the 66 rotation if Treyarch has any time to do that. But to be fair, we did get 2 snowy maps, which I guess are very similar to Summit in a way that kind of makes up for that map not being present. Yemmental, a map that I really like, especially in Demolition, and then a map like WMD in Year 2, which was only ever remastered one time, but through the Black Ops Pass in BO4, locked behind a paywall. So for most people, it's either their first time playing WMD or maybe their second time if they bought it in BO4, possibly their third time if they played the original in BO1, which a lot of people definitely didn't if they're not an OG. So Treyarch might have said, alright, we added our snowy maps into Cold War, the ones that we wanted. We're not going to do Summit this time around, also so we could avoid people saying that we remaster the same maps every single time. Maybe we'll bring Summit back in the next Black Ops. That could be what they're thinking right now, but like I've also been saying for like the past month-ish, if there is a patch for Cold War that comes out during Season 4 Reloaded or Season 5, those could be one of the final opportunities where we can maybe get 1 or 2 more multiplayer maps added to the Cold War rotation. However, considering Armada and Satellite, and I think even Miami have disappeared from the rotation, I would say I think we've either maxed out on the maps that could be added to the game for some reason, or they just want to have a certain set amount of maps in the game at a single time, which would mean that if we got another map or 2 in Cold War, they'd have to get rid of another map or 2, which I would personally vote for like Checkmate or Cartel, but that's just me. But as I promised a little while ago, I did put out a tweet asking for a hopeful Year 2 multiplayer playlist, which is like a 24/7 rotation of Jungle and WMD. Would love to see that, because I do see WMD quite often, but Jungle not so much. Or maybe they're going to add in another map or 2, and then finally after that we'll get like a Year 2 24/7 playlist. Would absolutely love to see that, but fingers crossed Treyarch has any time left to work on Cold War apart from just the bundles in 2022. Now, while we were doing the podcast this past Friday, a pretty crazy tweet came out from Reality UK, one of the individuals who's absolutely burned through all of Warzone Mobile's files in search of a lot of spicy information regarding Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 2024. This person then put out even more clear images of the concept art that has already been made for Black Ops 2024 multiplayer, and we get a better look at one of the upcoming maps that'll be in that Treyarch game. But upon further analysis of what's going on in this image, what we originally thought was like a museum being broken into and something that didn't really have much meaning, it was just some basic concept art for an upcoming map, it turned into a very interesting history lesson, since very knowledgeable members of the COD community, who I guess are familiar with history and art, actually figured out that we can see a painting in the concept art of Saddam Hussein, and we can also notice that this is Saddam's palace over in Babylon. So we're like, hold on a second, is this our first real confirmation of exactly when COD 2024 is going to take place? Is this direct confirmation of an early to mid 90s game that may also touch on the early 2000s with the Black Hawk Down incident? So I think unless they just magically put together this concept art to throw people off, or put together this concept art that is going to end up being meaningless, I do think this is our first indication of when the game will take place. Does this kind of put a nail in the coffin though for those out there that were hoping for like a semi-futuristic game, a game that focuses on what happened after the events of Black Ops 2. I mean, we'll get more into that later in this video, but I think a majority of the game will definitely be during the 90s or at some point close to that. Now, if you're like, wait a second, isn't that too controversial to cover? I personally don't think so. I understand it was less than 20 years ago when some of this stuff went down, and maybe a little closer to 25 years ago when some other things actually went down in history, but in all honesty, I don't think Call of Duty necessarily has ever really made Americans out to be the definitive good guys. I think games like Modern Warfare 2019, for example, and other games that have come out in recent years from Activision have very specifically pointed out that nobody's hands are really clean in war, and everybody's made mistakes. I think every faction of war is usually guilty of something. War crimes are very relevant, and I don't think Call of Duty's ever been too shy to admit that. So personally, I don't have a problem with them covering this. I think as long as they're upfront and they're not like, hey, yeah, everybody that was on one side of the war were like angels and heroes and made no mistakes. As long as they don't do that, I think we'll be fine. But considering this will be a Black Ops game, you guys know how Treyarch likes to put a spin on conspiracy theories and real life history to the point where it'll be fairly fictional anyway, but probably still on par a little bit with the realism being focused on a bit with the Modern Warfare reboot, which is also now canon to Black Ops. So I think there's a really huge opportunity here to kind of put a spin on the events that did take place in the 90s and early 2000s by saying that maybe Perseus had influence on said events. I mean, this will definitely be like an alt history type of Black Ops experience, which Treyarch is kind of known for anyway with the way they've covered major events in history. So that could be really damn cool if done correctly. But I will say, I do understand people that might say it is a bit too offensive or a bit too sensitive to cover some things like this. But I also think Activision will probably beat around the bush a little bit if they're still in charge at the time, if it's not Microsoft. I think they will still find a way to cover said events in a safe way, kind of similar to how Black Ops Cold War is still getting updates despite the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and with Russia. They've made sure to censor things like Mason's Ushanka hat coming out this Friday. They made sure to remove Ravenov completely from the Scythe Operator bundle. I mean, they've kind of danced around some really important issues and tried to make sure it's as clean as possible. So I'm sure they'll do the same thing with them covering those big events in Black Ops 2024. Now, I think in terms of characters in the next Call of Duty from Treyarch, there are some massive opportunities for many characters, I should say. I still think Black Ops 2 through 4 are canon, as I've stressed in several different videos now. If they want to change that, I'm also open to that, but as of right now, we have no evidence to support that they're going to end up retconning anything from Black Ops 2. I think you'll run into a problem, though, when, you know, Modern Warfare 2 coming out this fall kind of bleeds into the Black Ops 2 events a little bit. Maybe they'll throw some intel or some curveballs in that campaign to kind of make clear to us if Black Ops 2 is canon or not, and then that will then help us determine if Black Ops 2024 is going to follow suit and also kind of touch on things that kind of contradict what happened in Black Ops 2. I think Adler will play a much bigger role in the next game, along with some of the new characters that got introduced in Cold War, whereas Mason, Woods, and Hudson, not so much. I think there's some big potential for Mason at least, considering his 30-year disappearance during the events of Black Ops 2. You could definitely explore something with that. You could have him kind of tie into Adler a bit. Woods will be a bit tricky. I'm sure they could find a creative way to tie him in, but they have to be very careful with not crossing paths too much with the events of the past missions in Black Ops 2. Hudson dies, so I think he's just ruled out completely for the next Black Ops from Treyarch, but again, we'll have to wait and see what retcons are actually made. Now, we also have another updated list of some new weapons coming to Black Ops 2024, and this is an updated list from the version that got posted from Reality UK, who has gone through the Warzone mobile files. We have weapons like the AR-10, the KSP-58, the HK-21, a M16 DMR variant, a Mendoza RM2, a VSS Ventores, as well as a FN-FAL, an SG-542, some other mystery ones we don't know yet, a regular M16, a Colt 723, AK-74, AS Val, which is interesting, that's from Modern Warfare, the SG-550, another mystery there towards the bottom, so we're not too sure on some of the weapons that were found throughout the list, but that's a pretty clear breakdown with images of what to expect in that game, and you'll probably notice right away that those are a lot of weapons that were featured in the 90s and early 2000s, so as of right now, there's very little evidence to support that the next Black Ops will at all cover the future, but again, we're so far away from that game that anything could change from now until then. Now, I want to wrap up this video with a couple of interesting takes. First up, one from Courage, where he says, and I quote, "Reminder, Black Ops 3 is the best Call of Duty of all time, awesome prestige, great zombies, flashy abilities that lead to crazy moments, fantastic weapon camos, theater mode, and a solid campaign." First off, theater mode definitely worked very well in BO3, and was like the last fully functional one. BO4's was, it was pretty unstable, but worked most of the time. I think it still has some bugs to this day which suck, and then Cold War's version of theater is like, wow, this could have been so much better, but it does the job when I need it to at least, so we'll give it that. And yeah, BO3, cool prestige system. I've made clear before that I have no problem with the seasonal prestiges that Cold War had, because it gives you a reason to play for an extended period of time each season, aside from just trying out the new maps and weapons. So I don't mind the prestige changes, but BO3 had some good ones. Great zombies, cannot deny deny that, can never deny that. Flashy abilities, yeah, I think specialists were fun, but were also frustrating for players that like traditional COD, and if you weren't a fan of jetpacks, you probably weren't too fond of BO3 multiplayer. Weapon camos, absolutely, they did some of the best ones ever, but don't forget, there were a lot locked behind supply drops, and that's a whole other discussion we're not going to go into, but I think people out there that aren't a fan of the seasonal structure right now will love to go back to supply drops, but I think we'll quickly regret that if that ever did happen. But the point here about solid campaign, here's something I want to add in about that point. I think the solid campaign mention here is fair if you take into account the co-op element. I don't think necessarily from a story standpoint it was that strong of a campaign. It was a cool mind twist towards the end, but the fact that it was so disconnected from the other two Black Ops games kind of had me feeling a bit weird about the story. I wasn't too invested. Gameplay wise, there were some impressive moments. It was very immersive, so I will give it that. But I would say no matter what a campaign is like, if it ever has a co-op element, I just think it's infinitely more interesting to play and to grind, to go for platinum trophy on, to stream. So hopefully in the future we get more co-op campaigns from the COD series. We haven't had enough of them. Only World at War and Black Ops 3 had one. Not sure why we haven't had any more, but I will say that's what makes it solid to me, but I do admit it has some severe flaws. Now Courage then makes a point that the campaign is used to justify a $60 price tag. I'd rather all the devs just work on making MP and zombies the best it can be because it has more than 6 to 10 hours of playability. That's a fair point for sure, but I would say there's many more hours you can get out of a campaign if you're going for platinum or if you're playing co-op with different friends. But if you're just going solo only and aren't going for trophies, then I do get his point about only having 6 to 10 hours of playability. But then we have a response from Ralph, which I kind of agreed with, but then kind of didn't. He says, and I quote, "Totally disagree. Campaigns are where the heartbeat is put into all the ones and zeros. Narratives play a huge role in establishing a game's identity and will ultimately kick off development. BO4 and Battlefield 2042 serves as great examples." Now, I can get the Battlefield point maybe because that game is just not finished and still isn't finished, and I can't believe that game's even out publicly. But the Black Ops 4 point, again, call me a fanboy, I don't care. I think Black Ops 4 has a fantastic identity from its multiplayer zombies and Blackout. I think even if the game had a campaign, it wouldn't have changed much about my opinion about the game's identity. I think they were definitely going for something interesting with that game's story. You can see that very clearly in the Specialist Stories cutscenes, but I certainly think a game doesn't have to have a campaign to have an identity, but it certainly helps out with that if the other parts of the game were lacking, right? If multiplayer, Blackout, and zombies were lacking in BO4, then I would say, yeah, a campaign would have helped the game's identity, but I never felt like the game had an identity crisis. I just felt like there was some weird leadership going on during BO4 to the point where stability was just a mess. QA testers were not put in place correctly, and also you had publishers that rushed the release of Black Ops 4 to compete with Red Dead Redemption 2 for no reason. That game was problematic in more ways than another, but I don't think it was because of a lack of a campaign. But that is about it. This has been dkdynamite. Leave all your thoughts down below in the comment section. What are your thoughts on the gameplay that surfaced of Summit for Cold War, which it may have been in Blackout 2 or regular multiplayer, we're just not sure. Blackout 2 at least. But also, what are your thoughts on an update regarding the early images of Black Ops 2024 featuring some very spicy artwork, or paintings I should say, which do hint at the direction of that game. Really hope you've enjoyed, and peace out everybody.